Corla. And I want to support this motion, and I want to thank Deputy Wallace and Deputy Daly and the small number of other people who accompanied them to Syria and saw for themselves the facts on the ground. And perhaps, Minister, you might take a chance to listen to them. There's no propaganda here. It's following a visit to Syria, following a tremendous amount of research, that we stand here tonight to say we do not support the sanctions. And it is absolutely nonsensical and hypocritical to stand over sanctions from America and from the EU that are supposedly targeted, when we know from a UN report and we know from leaked memos that that is not the position. They are not targeted. And as my colleague said beside me, it is the vulnerable people who suffer. And so if we look at some of the comments that have been made, and we can refer you to all of this, Minister, we can refer you to the fact that there's a shortage of insulin, anaesthetics, specific antibiotics, blood products, vaccines and so on. This is by the World Health Organization and health agencies on the ground who say that the sanctions are making life absolutely impossible. Now, I'm not here to tell lies and I'm not here to exaggerate. That's what we're being told from what we're reading, that they're simply making a situation on the ground much, much worse. And yet you persist, and actually Fianna Fáil are telling me they're targeted as well, which is doubly shocking, in persisting with this illusion that this can be a targeted programme when the reality on the ground is far from that. And I'm not here to defend the Assad regime, actually. And I have read the amnesty reports, and the most appalling war crimes have been carried out by the government, by ISIS, but also by US-led forces. And they've been cited by Amnesty as well in relation to the killing of hundreds of civilians. At the end of the day, Bashar al-Assad is more firmly in place than he ever was. And we have trotted out the figures here tonight. 4.8 million people have fled, 6.6 million are internally displaced, and quite significantly, half of that number, 6.6 million, half of that are children. And then we throw out a figure like 300,000 dead and millions injured and maimed. And you're sitting here tonight still standing over sanctions that are totally, totally unjust and not achieving what they're setting out to do. But much worse than that, they're making the situation much worse. So I want to thank the deputies. I want to thank Sinn Féin as well, because I have read their motion and their amendment, and I have no difficulty supporting it. I also want to quote from the UN study which has been mentioned here tonight, and it's a very cautious report, very moderate report. And over a year ago, they appealed, Minister, if you read it, they appealed for an immediate strategic review of the sanctions with all the stakeholders, because they simply were not doing what they were supposed to do. And indeed we know from the sanctions against Iraq, and that has been quoted already, where 500,000 people died. Listen to that figure, 500,000. And we had the very courageous Dennis Halliday resigning in protest after many, many years, a lifetime in the UN, a decision he didn't take lightly. And he equated to what was happened to genocide. And then we have Albright, and she has been quoted already by Deputy Wallace. And really, I'm going to quote it again, if I can find it, because it really is the most appalling statement from her, that it was worth it. And she said, 500,000 people dead. And this is the US with their sanctions. The price was worth it. That self-damning confession should really, at this stage, and 7 years after the sanctions, and it used to be the age of reason, 7 years. It used to be the age where one would take stock when one grew up. Is that the type of leadership we want? Or can I quote from the retired US General Wesley Clark? And he revealed in the Pentagon plans to overthrow 7 governments in 5 years, including Syria. All that those plans achieved was an appalling loss of life and left the man in place, who none of us have any respect for, even more secure in his position. Yes, the people of Syria walked and marched for democracy, but they never asked for a war of the nature that they got for democracy. This was a country that was self-sufficient almost in 2011, a country that has cities which were the cradle of civilization. They never asked for this barbarism, and they never asked for our hypocrisy. Thank you.